Welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today, we're joined by Nicola Steel. Nicola is the founder of JJP Talent Solutions, and JJP Talent Solutions is all about recruiting in the IT space, and Nicola's been involved in that since 1999, going way back there, so plenty of experience in the space. Why we've brought Nicola on is to talk about if you are building tech and tech product, at some point, you may want to move from the outsourced model to bringing a team internally. So we want to understand what that means, what that looks like, and how you might go about that. Nicola, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. And just one thing, it's JJP. I think you forgot the P.
I forgot the P. Apologies, y'all.
And JJP, you can see them here in the background. Well, you can't quite see them. You've got the three most important things in my life, apart from my husband, who is also called Andrew, but that didn't fit in with the name. So you got Jessica, Jasmine, and the P is Purdy, the dog, the one that I silenced.
Put the dog in a name. I love it.
Yes.
Brilliant.
She's adorable. Thank you very much. So recruiting for the last 22 years. I must have been a child when I started. And as you can hear from my accent, quite a large proportion of that was in the UK. So I was in the UK up until 2012 and moved to Brisbane in April of 2012. And in the UK, I worked for various corporate IT recruitment companies in London, and then had the first baby, Jessica, in 2005, almost exactly 16 years ago. And after I had my first baby, I decided to build my own business. So I had 6 years of running my own business, Morgan Steel, in the UK, mainly dealing with London and the Southeast. And then my husband got the opportunity to move to Brisbane. I'd watched lots of Neighbours, Home and Away, knew everything about Australia, and thought, why not? I did think I could run an IT recruitment business that was UK based in Australia. That was either very optimistic,
Yes,
or very stupid. I think probably the latter. So I quickly realised that Australia was more expensive than we realised, and had to go back into corporate recruitment, working for somebody else, which I endured for about 3 years, and then set at JJP back in 2016, so nearly 5 years ago. So I think so I like to run my own show, but what I also like to do is help companies, tech companies, build high-performing teams. So the majority of clients over those 22 years that I've dealt with have been a mix of tech startups, scale-ups, innovative SMEs, corporates to a lesser extent, because I don't like bureaucracy. I can't even say it. It drives me insane. It takes the fun out of it. And one of my clients, for example, this is back in London, and I've known him since 2000. He's now out in Seattle working for Amazon, that helped him build. He was involved in mobile technology when it was first really fashionable, and recruited for 10 years, and recruited his team. And really from just a tiny little seed to this organization that eventually got acquired by OpenText for multi-millions. He always paid his invoices on time, but he never gave me the multi-millions that that he achieved there. And then in Brisbane, a similar aspect, really focusing on that startup scale-up space, and particularly Series A, Series B is the space that I really enjoy, because they've still got the fun, but they've also starting to get the money, because when you're really early stage, it's difficult because you're bootstrapping. So I still deal with those kind of organizations, but when they get to that next Series A, Series B stage.
a different level of business when you're dealing in that space. Like the red tape just doesn't exist, and decisions can be made faster, and the momentum's moving. Especially if there's a bit of funding and revenues behind these businesses as they're growing. It is a lot of fun, and a lot of just learning on the fly, which is what I enjoy about the space.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing. Once it gets almost too big, the fun kind of disappears, and the red tape and the processes come in that can sometimes stifle innovation. It very much depends on the team and how it's run, but otherwise, if you just let it be like it was before, it can start becoming a bit chaotic. So I understand that as well.
Yeah, I think you get to a point in business where you need to put some structure in, but you got to be aware that you don't just want to put layers and layers. So that's, because then you end up in the same space. So how do you manage that, evolve that? Yeah, you need to learn. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So digging in on high performance teams. So from your perspective, what are some of the key characteristics of a high performance team that we want to sort of nurture in our environment is probably the word that I'm looking for. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think the most successful teams that I've seen grow and develop and be high performing are really values driven. And they're not just something that's written on the wall. They live it, they breathe it. Everybody is on that page on a daily basis. And that is so, so important that they understand why they're there, what impact they're going to make, rather than just turning up every day, doing the job, going home. It's about really living those values and really making a difference, whether it's a difference from the customer's perspective or whether they're more purpose-driven from an environmental or society perspective. But it all comes down to having those values and being really values-driven. And trust. Trust is so important and should be the absolute foundation of the team there, and giving it rather than necessarily expecting it to be earned, that the trust is there, and that mutual respect. And as I talk, and I say this a lot throughout the whole recruitment process, it's like a marriage. It has to work for both parties. It's not the big I am and the little people. It's having that mutual respect.
I think I would agree with that. As we've grown our own team, I see it as team. It's about people, team. We're all one and the same, and we're all collectively on the same journey path and helping improve collectively, helping evolve collectively. That's one of the things I see to drive a good culture. That's from some learnings that we've had.
And I think that's again, that collective, that collaboration, that mutual accountability, that everybody is in it together. But also empathy as well, because sometimes we do have bad days, or something's going on with your husband or the kids or wife or the dog or whatever, your parents. So having that empathy to understand, and sometimes give a bit of slack when they've been excellent and there's a bit of an issue, is rising that person back up again as well. So I think kindness is also really, really important. Kindness and empathy, providing psychological safety as well. And it's not kind of airy-fairy, be nice.
You're looking at really people first.
Absolutely.
Which is, we're people. I think we can all, look, in business, can work about the numbers. But people are everything. Without happy people in a place where they know they're supported, they're considered. If they have a bad day, like you said, they know that they can turn to somebody and just have a chat about it. And I think that's massively important in any space. It's a safe environment. That's one thing I've learned about building team. But love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. And the people word, that is totally my language. I'm all about the people. I won't bring out my brochure here, but it's called The Power of People. I'm writing a book. I'm not very far into it, to be perfectly honest, called The Power of People, about building high-performing teams. It's a work in progress. It's been in progress for a while now. But again, it is all about the people. So when you talk about bums on seats, that sounded very Northern English then, bums on seats, and talking about human capital and all that kind of thing, it just doesn't feel right. It's all about the people. It's not just about the profitability, and the profitability will come because of the people, but it has to come from those foundations. And for example, talking about the psychological safety, so people can make mistakes, but by making mistakes is how they innovate. But if they feel fear that, oh golly, if I make a mistake, I'm going to get told off or I'm going to lose my job, then they don't want to make the mistake, and therefore they don't innovate, and therefore they don't create, the company doesn't create game-changing products. So it's all very much a domino effect there. I did a podcast quite recently with David Davies. Do you know from Ag Unity?
I don't know David Davies.
So he's all about helping smallholder farmers in developing countries. But prior to that, he worked for JP Morgan, he worked for Goldman Sachs, he worked for the big banks. But the reason why he was successful, because he wasn't fearful of losing his job. He'd just do what he could, because most people in banking can't innovate because they're fearful of the big stick being whacked. And he was a maverick, so he didn't care, he just did it. But yeah, I think that talking to various people, that psychological safety is so, so important. And diversity as well. So quite often when you think of tech teams,
I can explain our tech team if you like.
Well, it's a sweeping generalization, but often they're white male, aged 25 to 35. But when you look at the population, it's very diverse. So your customers are diverse.
Yeah, some diversity is important, and we're in a space where we're 90% male-dominated business, and you start to learn that bringing in females into the environment makes a very different. There's different thinking, there's different perspectives, but diversity is important. We have diversity in our business, which is great. So different cultures and aspects. We have an offshore team, which is based in Nepal, which is bringing some significant diversity. So I feel like we have diversity, but I find that the different levels of experiences that people have, then you have different thoughts, different ideas that come to the business. So it is very important.
Absolutely. And having that respect for that diversity, both of skills and thoughts. But it's not just women, it's the demographic diversity and older workers. That's a big issue. That's even bigger than gender. So men, once they hit 50, they think that they have to give up. They don't think they're being considered for these opportunities. So you've got your demographic diversity, but also the cognitive diversity as well, and the how people think, and bringing that in. I could go on forever about diversity.
Yeah, having people with different age brackets and I think that's another area that we can all focus in on, just bringing in same. I think that's something that gets stuck in as you're building culture. People are like you're attracted to, and that doesn't generally serve the business and the culture long term.
And I don't think it's not through a desire to make it happen.
It just sort of happens.
I think at the beginning it does happen because you've got the guys that are at college together and they get an idea and they are within their own networks. And then it gets more difficult for example, me. If you probably wouldn't want me on the team, I said my coding skills are extremely limited. But I probably would be maybe a little intimidated. And older people seem to write themselves off, and in a way, as a woman, for example, women often won't apply for a role unless they tick 90% of the boxes. Men will apply if they tick 60%. It's quite a well-known stat. So in a way, that's a female issue. That comes from the women needing to be bolder as well. So there are so many different things. But I don't think, from a tech leadership perspective, that tech leaders don't want that to happen. They want it to happen. It's how we can make it happen, and standing together shoulder to shoulder and thinking what of better ways. And I think it is changing. It has certainly improved in the last 20 odd years that I've been working, but there's still a lot of work to do.
I think you've touched on a lot there. And I can draw a lot to our experience. So just to give you some context, Anthony and I started Aerion, which is our core business, 13 years ago with some uni mates. That's exactly how we started. And then you attract people in the same environment, which are more people out of the same uni. We basically had, and still to this day, a lot of our core team comes from the same university, out of La Trobe in Melbourne. So it's very interesting how you sort of build a dynamic, but it's around a network we're around, right? But now we're starting to bring people in other experiences as you sort of grow team and evolve. You start to realize that, we've got to get outside our own box. And there becomes a time that I think if you did it earlier, it would have been more beneficial for the business.
And I think probably in your university cohorts, there probably weren't that many women that you could bring on board anyway.
Probably a handful of women only.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, do you know Schedulo? They're a tech startup. Brisbane.
I imagine
origins,
what they do, though.
Yeah, they're a mobile workforce scheduling application. But the director of engineering, he would have probably been in the 90s, late 90s or early 2000s when he graduated. There was one woman on the course. So
it wouldn't have been far off. I reckon.
Most of my classes was one girl.
Yeah. Which must be quite intimidating from her perspective as well.
Oh, definitely.
And then you have to almost mirror the people. So she almost becomes quite laddish, male, to talk to you guys. So there is I won't go on about it for too long because there's
I think there's
so
a lot
much
of interesting dynamic in that, and I think people just need to think about that as you're building teams. So I think it's a
yeah, and also if you've got kids, it's how you talk to them, how you talk to your little girls. Don't give them a doll, give them a computer to break down, or give them something. Don't do stereotypes. And so it starts when they're really, really young. But I'm kind of going a little bit off piste there. What else was I going to say? Yes, that was it. Have fun.
Fun's good. I like
high-performing teams need to have fun as well. So celebrating the wins as a team, not just Dave was really good. It's just everybody in the team has come together and collaborated and built this brilliant product, whatever it may be. So I'm all for fun. I love having fun. It should be a part of your everyday. But I think as part of a high-performing team, celebrating those successes and those little wins, not necessarily the big release. It's all those little wins and getting together and not just having pizzas on a Friday. It's more than that. So I think
one of the dynamics that has changed as a result of COVID, especially for our business and many businesses, is a lot more people are working from home environments. What's some of the things you've seen that high-performing teams that have gone to that mold that are more remote workers now? And a lot of this is happening in many industries. What would you recommend around the connecting, keeping that culture going? Because it's something that we've been trying to look and understand, but I'm sure many other businesses out there that are in a team environment working remotely would want to look for some tools and opportunity to just keep growing that team and culture.
That's a really great question. And I think your experience of COVID in Melbourne is quite different to my experience of COVID in Brisbane. We got off lightly. And then I have family and friends in the UK, of course, and their experience would be very different to yours in Melbourne. And people in I have friends in the US, again, it would be different. COVID, I think, will create a need for more flexibility. So if you are totally office first and lack that flexibility, I think you will self-select people out as an organisation. Probably a hybrid model is going to work best. So some time in the office for collaboration, team building, getting to know your team, and the opportunity to do work flexibly, whether it's be at home, whether it be in a cafe, whatever works for you. Now, using my own personal example, I prefer working at home. I get a lot more done. I'm very easily distracted. I'll be chatting to everyone. Oh, do you want to go to the pub? Oh, that sounds lovely. So it's better keeping me at home. My husband, however, and he's not a tech person, but as soon as we were allowed out back to the office, end of May last year, you couldn't see him for the dust because he drove off at high speed. I don't know what it says about his family, but different people want to work in different environments. And I think that's having that understanding of what works for people. So not being totally prescriptive, not one size fits all. I know some companies that have been flexible before COVID, and that has worked really, really well for them. The issue from their perspective, though, is now it's not necessarily a major selling point because everybody else was doing it. So they've had to find other ways.
Yeah, I think that could have been a selling point. Yeah, especially with people that want that more flexibility. Now everyone's sort of had to offer the flexibility. Had no choice, especially in Melbourne.
So,
yeah.
But then that said, some companies are right. Okay. Particularly in Australia, we've got it under control. I want you back in the office. And some team members will go, well, actually, it's worked much better for me being at home, whether it be because they can manage their kids more, school pickup, drop off, etc., and just get their work done. I think it needs to be looked at on an individual basis.
It goes back to people first, right?
Exactly, and the values. But you've still got to keep that collaboration. So people don't like to just be stuck on their own, not communicating. And again, a generalization, but tech people, particularly developers, tend to be more introverted. But they still need to have that people contact as well. So I did actually a podcast about, would it have been about 2 years ago with, do you know Work 180?
Work 180, I've heard that before.
So it's more about, it's about creating a more, I can't remember the precise details about it, but it's more about diversity with a focus on women. I knew the head of engineering there.
I don't know it now because, I thought it was something else, yes, but that's okay. Yeah.
So it's kind of turning it on its head. So looking at for example, maternity benefits. So it's all very transparent. But I was talking about to the head of engineering there a couple of years ago, and it was all flexible working. But they were all over Australia. I think the majority of them were Brisbane based. But they would catch up like this. But they'd also catch up for lunch as well, physically. And it would be more of an opportunity to enjoy each other's company
rather than
talking shop.
That's a fair point, right? Because, we're still collaborating as a business remotely, and we have to. But I think, putting fun into the catch-ups would make a lot of sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And understanding people. So if you know about people's situation, whether it's their family situation or what their passions and hobbies are and all that, you can relate better to them. And just have a better understanding of why they do what they do or how they do things, the way they do things.
You need to understand them personally, not just the work environment. people.
Yeah, we're not robots.
Yeah, exactly. So in work, we're very different to at home, but you want to bring a bit of that to work. You don't just want robots, like you said. I think it's you need to embrace the difference in people and what they enjoy doing outside work too. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. I did work for somebody once, and he said he wanted robots. Well, it wasn't very long before I left that organisation, because it's like, no, that's
terrible. There's no personality. There's nothing.
Well, exactly. You can just use an AI thing, can't you? And anyway, so I hope that answers your question. I think it can work, but it needs to be looking at individual needs, but also making sure that there's a level playing field as well. So it's not us and them. Having some remote, some in the office, and everybody's talking. It's like, what's going on? And you can't understand the whole dynamic. So
yeah, I think just
it needs managing well.
What we've decided to do is continue to ask the team what they need, and just be open about it. So that's what we've found has worked, just involving them in the decision-making process. We're not a big team. We've got 11 guys in Oz, and their offshore teams, 15, 16, but they're forced to work from home at the moment. They're locked down. Whereas
they're in Nepal.
Yeah, they're in Nepal.
Yeah, which their situation's pretty bad.
They've been asking for an office for months, but they just can't get into one.
Do an office, yeah. So we'd like to get.
And then our team here doesn't really want to move back to an office at all.
It's like the grass is always greener, isn't it? What was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, I've got an assistant. She's based in the Philippines. And we have a chat every day because she's stuck at home. And she's got her husband and her little girl. But she enjoys our chats. And we chat about just general. She's, about her family and what she did at the weekend. And I think people still need that. That human connection is really important. And I guess people have suffering very much from Zoom fatigue.
We are.
And it is quite exhausting. Even though you're not going anywhere or doing anything, you're doing something, but you're having to really, really listen because you don't get the nuances that you might get in person-to-person contact. And you also will go back to back to back to back because you think you can fit everything in. I know, because I'm doing that today, that I'm just like, oh, golly, I haven't factored in when I'm going to eat.
I think we did that from like April to July last year, or maybe even August.
Yeah, you guys had a rough old ride. We were so lucky here.
But then again, I had meetings out on Tuesday, I think, and I had from like 9 till 2, and I only had 3 hours of meetings. The rest was driving around.
Yeah.
So to me, that felt like a big waste of a day.
I think, again, it's the balance, isn't it?
Yeah. You can't do that every day.
Yeah, and I do that. So I have a couple of days in the city, and I love it. I mean, Brisbane, I love the city here. It's great. But I wouldn't want to go in 5 days a week because it is the commutes.
Right. You have to consider that because, like you said before, I myself have found myself more productive at home because we can do back-to-back meetings. You can probably do 3 hours of meetings in a 3-hour block, whereas if you want to do 3 hours of meetings and travel, that's all you can do in a day. So it becomes...
Absolutely. And I think the commute in Melbourne is probably worse than the commute is in Brisbane. But when I was talking to you at the beginning, how it's a lovely sunny day, but on Wednesday it was a horrendous storm, and getting back through that, which was unfortunately my meeting day, was horrendous. I thought I was going to die, quite honestly.
You can have some interesting storms up there. I've been stuck in them, having to pull over my car because you just can't see where you're going.
It was absolutely terrible. And I had my teenage daughter with me, and she's a total panicker as well. But you can feel it. It starts getting really dark and ominous, like some kind of horror film, and you know it's coming, and you hope that you get home before it starts, but we didn't. It was like... Anyway, sorry, I've gone a little bit off piece there.
No, that's okay. I've got another...
So,
I'll drive you into probably a different point because I think what we're sort of getting at here is the most important thing is building a culture around people, understanding their needs, wants, desires, and bringing that into business. Also getting some diversity through business and working in ways of working, in our people, age, demographic, female, male demographic. I think that's all really important. Values have also been talked about. So you would imagine having this in place will attract more high-performance people to your team. If you're starting out, you're pretty early on, you're one or two people in a startup space, how do we bring this sort of culture perspective and thinking in early before we just bring in just talent? Because that's one thing you can get sort of stuck in, just bring in talent, and they might not be right for where you want to take or even thought about culture. So what would you recommend there?
That's a really great question. And I think you need, if it's, as you say, a couple of people or a few people, is really, really understanding what your mission, your vision, your values are at the very start. How can you bring people on if you don't understand what you're doing yourself? So make that really clear and not wishy-washy, concrete, completely no, because you can't teach people what you don't know yourself.
Agree. If you're not clear, you cannot communicate it, and you're not going to communicate it clearly. That's for sure. Yeah.
And also the other thing as well, you might bring people on because they're the most experienced, technically amazing person, but there could be a real disconnect from a cultural perspective, and you're a bit hoodwinked by that. So again, really understanding your values, and sometimes culture fit can be better than skill fit, or capability fit, because you can teach skills. But it's much more difficult to get somebody with those shared values. So looking outside the box and looking at potential people that kind of fit, that can do it, not necessarily right now, but will be able to do it in the future if you spend the time. I guess it's having that time available. And from a commercial perspective, if you've got somebody with potential, their salary expectations will be a lot lower, rather than somebody who's got all the skills, all the experience. You got to be paying for that, but also with that, they could come with their own, what's the word that I'm looking for? That kind of bully,
toxic culture
ego.
comes to mind.
Pardon?
Toxic culture comes to mind.
Toxic culture, exactly.
Corrupt the office.
And a bully can really destroy the whole team. And so not having ego, but having those growth mindsets, and not hiring somebody just because you're dazzled by their technical brilliance. You need to think deeper than that, because the damage that bully could cause, that ego could cause, could be really detrimental to your team. And I've seen it happen, and it's a mistake. But you won't know that, because if you don't know, you don't have the clarity on what your values are, what your vision is, what your mission is, then you're just going to be amazed by these technical skills and not see beyond that. So I'd say get the clarity, get the foundations sorted.
I think it's important, especially when you're starting out 1, 2, 3, 4 people. You really need people on the same page, that are driven by the same things and are prepared to learn and grow together. I think that's one thing that I've said a couple of times, but growth together is important in any business, especially as you're building something from nothingness. And then eventually your objectives are to grow, support, and help more people. Or that's maybe one of your objectives, right? So you need the team to be growing and on that same trajectory. Otherwise, we've had people in our business that have been technically great, and I understand where you're coming from. They just don't fit the mold, and they just want to do things the way they're doing it, and they don't want to support and help, but it just doesn't work.
They don't be team players. Almost.
Yeah, and I mean, there's still that opportunity to innovate, and I think it depends how you manage them, but you could spend more time managing them than you could with the team that are actually being team players. The other thing, I think you made a really good point there as well. So when you're a small team, you're bootstrapping and you're struggling to make those sales and everything, that if you've got the same shared values, you can look beyond that and rise everyone up together. Whereas if it's just a job and it's people are just there to do a job, then they don't really care. They'll go and get another job. I think if you get those people, you guys support each other a lot more as well. Which I think is really important.
Yeah, support's very important in business.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like a family. I know it's a bit corny, like a family, like a marriage, but you need that support to get through the tough times. And particularly for tech startups, it's going to be tough. Your Canvas, your Atlassians, etc., they haven't had it easy.
And they're the unicorns that people talk about. There's millions of others that don't get to that level nor scale, but can still be successful in their own right. Yes, that's
a really good point, actually. I love the animal analogy. So I met, do you know Faith Rees from Six Pivots? So she's up in Brisbane. Anyway, she's very much into she's one of the women I was talking about flexibility. And she's not a unicorn. She doesn't want to be a unicorn. She wants to be a zebra. And that's much more about sustainability. So it's not, being a unicorn isn't for everybody. And there are various other animals in the zoo. I can't remember. There's camels. I think there's a donkey. You don't want to be a donkey. A donkey's the wrong thing to be. And a gazelle. A gazelle's in Africa. So it's very nimble and fast and what have you. But look it up. I'll send you a link. There's some really interesting animals. And you don't all have to be unicorns.
Agree. So, I think if we just all focused on that, and I think you need to, as founders and people directing the level of business, that's key. You need to know where you're going, what your objectives are, what are you trying to achieve, because that will set up the way you make every decision. And people is probably, I would say, the most important decision you're going to make in business. Because you have the right people and culture around you, the rest will come. It will take time. It will come. You collectively work together. You will solve the problems. You will evolve the business.
And I think there's a lot more longevity from that as well, rather than just chasing the money and what have you. That your company will probably last longer with that kind of approach. And the other thing I've noticed, so when companies get their funding, and you've got two different mindsets. One, well, hey, it's like we won the lottery, and they just throw it around willy-nilly, and they'll offer the big bucks, 10, 20% more than the average salary. But then, which, as a recruiter, oh, great, big fee. But then 6 months later, they've had to make these people redundant because they spent all the money like a lottery winner, and then these people are back on the market. So quite often when I'm talking to clients and they're offering silly money, I'll say, look, obviously it's not my money, but in my experience, it's not necessarily a good thing. And it's also not necessarily a good thing for the candidate, because then they get used to a lifestyle.
At that level, yeah.
Yeah, whether they buy a house or rent a house or their car or going out for dinner or whatever, they're going on holiday. And then when they get back to real life, it's really disappointing. So it's a mistake I have seen. It's actually probably not as bad here in Brisbane. It tended to be more in London, probably because there were bigger sums of money that were being dealt with. Actually, I have seen a few in Brisbane that do that, where you think, oh, you're probably paying too much.
It is a naivety on the founders and the business owners' perspective, because, business is just painting a nice picture. It's not as easy as people make it out to be. There's a lot of learning to be done. as you level up in business, you need to learn new things, solve new problems. That's a great thing. But if we were to start with $2 million in the bank when we started, I would have blown that money too. And I would have probably done all the wrong things because you don't have the level of understanding of what really needs to be done at those stages. So I think it's important, if you're in that bucket, get good advisors around you. They're going to help you guide you on this journey too, not just think that you know it all, because generally that's when you can get yourself into all sorts of trouble.
Absolutely. And I think as well, when you're dealing with, you haven't got $2 million, you're dealing in bootstrapping, it makes you much more resourceful. So you'll squeeze every last bit out of what you've got. And then once you do get the money, you've still got the experience of being resourceful, being resilient, etc. Because too much can actually be a bad thing.
Yeah, because you're going to find places to spend it. Yes, that's.
You can get a bit flabby. You can get a bit lazy. And I don't mean literally, obviously. You know what I mean? That because you've got too much, you kind of like, whatever, sort of, we'll just throw some money at it and it'll happen, rather than that resourceful attitude that you had at the beginning. So
I'll take it back to money is one type of resource. There are plenty of others. There's just time is a resource too. There are just innovation, I believe, is a resource, and just people's ideas are resources. Networks are resources. There's plenty of other different resources that we can tap into. Channel partners can be a focus and a resource. I think, I think I've heard this when I speak to a lot of startups is, we need the money to do X. And I ask the question, why? What else could you be doing to drive this forward? How else might you do this? So I think you just got to ask different questions. There's many other ways to get things done than just having dollars in the bank. It's not the only answer.
Absolutely. And I mean, I deal with quite a lot of early stage bootstrapping startups, and they haven't got much money, but they could turn into, it's unlikely they're going to be the next Canva or Atlassian, for example, but be really successful. So I help them out and do low fees so they can start building their teams. And then once they get to that level, is say, look, we do actually need to move it up a notch. But it was to help you to lift you there, and what have you. So yeah, having that flexibility, which is from my own personal perspective, because I can make my own decisions rather than working in a corporate IT company. I can offer.
You can do that, right? Yes.
Yeah, a manager would probably shoot me for offering some of the fees that I do, but these people will come back to me when they are successful. So it's all, again, coming back to the people and the power of people. So
if you're coming from a place of helping businesses grow, that's a great place to be. Obviously, it may impact in the short term, but I think, if you're standing in that place, that's generally going to serve yourself, your business, and your culture in your own world, right?
Absolutely, and it's a long game, but Brisbane, there's like 1 degree of separation. So you try
it's a small market, right?
try to annoy as few people as possible because everybody knows everybody. But I think there's still generally there's 6 degrees of separation. So the more you help people, the more it gets out there about how you've helped people and brought them up, and it comes back. It's karma, isn't it? It comes back in dividends and not literally, you know what I mean.
I think, it's an interesting chat. Last question I'll ask you is if you're in a position of retaining people in a team, as I imagine it's going to be your own culture, but if you have a low performing person in your team, what happens from there? What do we do?
Well, again, I think what's important is clarity. So have you made this clear to this person what good performance or outstanding performance actually is? Which I think is really important.
And do you really know? That's another thing.
Again, it's, do you have the clarity yourself, like from the beginning, in terms of the values, mission, vision, etc.? The other thing as well is don't wait till the annual review or the quarterly review or whenever you do your reviews and say, back in January, you did this. Say it in the moment, be direct, be honest, deal with it immediately, I think is really, really important. And then you can overcome it rather than waiting till the end, mid-May, where we are, mid-end May, and it's like, well, that could have been sorted. A stitch in time saves 9, so to speak. And I think the other thing as well is really, if they've been a really good performer and then suddenly it's tipped over, why? And finding out what the underlying cause is.
And that might be a clarity thing too, once again, that you've touched upon.
It could be a clarity thing. It could be a personal thing, which again, understanding people as people, where, with families or hobbies or whatever, as I said, but really understanding that and having that conversation and finding out, is it capability or is it their attitude?
That's important. Because if an attitude is dwindling and there's no interest in being a part of the team culture vision, which I hope that you've done, then that needs to be brought to a head, because that's not going to serve the business or the person being in the business, if that's the case.
But I mean, the attitude could be they're not getting on with somebody on the team. So you could maybe look at the team dynamics. So it could be something quite simple that is retrievable, or they've just developed a bad attitude. But there might be an underlying cause. And so you need to ask lots of questions.
If they were a great performer at one point and they've turned to a not so great performer, something's changed. So if we can solve the problem, then we might get them back to where they were. So
and that probably happens sometimes. Like if you promote someone and they're not ready for it, or then they don't want to be in that role as well.
That's a really great point. And also, if you wanted that promotion, but you didn't get it. So I've known of people that haven't got the promotion and then they've kind of just been cross about it and their attitudes completely changed when they've been a really good performer. And I know of a number of people that's happened to. But then, as Anthony, sorry, I'm British. What was I going to say? That people that don't have the skill set and they get promoted and they can't live up to it, and then they self-select themselves out as well. So again, it's about managing that. And then the capability, can you train them? Do they have the capability to be trained? Great, if they do. But if they don't, again, you need to have a different conversation.
Yeah, in that situation, it's probably better. You might leave them where they are to perform better in that role than trying to learn and upskill them where they'll perform at, say, 70% of what they could have done in the other role. They'll be more effective and happier potentially too.
But I've known other people that they've been promoted, but then they've had bad family situations like going through a divorce, and they've had to focus on that, which is so having the conversation and allowing them to take that step back and still being part of the organisation. So again, it's about the people.
Yeah, just
it's having
why.
the questions, having that dialogue, and you can still have that dialogue whether you're face-to-face or like we're face-to-face remotely, and finding out what's going on. Not in a nosy Parker, coming from a place of help and what have you.
Oh, brilliant. Nicola, I think there's plenty for people to think about listening to this episode, especially if you are a building team. There's plenty to learn in this space because we all want to build team products and business that's going to grow and expand and serve more people. I think in the startup and that sort of space, that's generally people are looking to do. So it's really important to get this right from the beginning. So touching upon culture and understanding where you're going. Some really good insights through this conversation. Nicola, it's been a pleasure. If there's the last couple of things if I wanted to add, but otherwise share how people can learn about JJP Talent and Solutions and connect with you.
Thank you. Well, I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Yeah, it's been a great chat.
Thank you. And yeah, it's all about the people. That's what I always say. And it's fairly simple, really. I mean, I know there's complexity. People are complex. In terms of getting in touch with me, I'm pretty visible on LinkedIn. And feel free to share my LinkedIn profile. But it's basically Nicola Christina Steel. Christina Nicola Nicola, Christina Christina, Steel STWL. I have to say that because it's a simple name, but people spell Nicola incorrectly, Christina incorrectly, and stick an E on the end of steel. So there you go. Yes, exactly. But happy to connect. Love talking to you. It was great. And and if anybody wants any help, either in terms of growing their teams or some advice about people within their team, or people within teams that want advice themselves, then a career advice, then I'm happy to talk. So thank you.
No, thank you. Really appreciate you coming on DevReady Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.